The scripture reading this morning is a selection of verses from Psalm 118. The Lord is my strength and my might. He has become my salvation. There are glad songs of victory in the tents of the righteous. The right hand of the Lord does valiantly, and the right hand of the Lord is exalted. The right hand of the Lord does valiantly. I shall not die, but I shall live, and recount the deeds of the Lord. I thank you that you have answered me and have become my salvation. The stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. You are my God, and I will give thanks to you. You are my God, I will extol you. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever.
All right. Welcome to our latest segment of Torture the Ask the Minister. Again, how this goes, we do this every couple of months, is I will attempt to address a number of your questions. Some have already been sent in, so we'll alternate. I'll start with one that's already been sent in, and then we'll go out to you, and we'll go back and forth for a little bit. All right, here we go. How do you feel about the creation of a government religious liberty commission or having someone in national government designated to do religious outreach? Also, how do you feel about the possible move toward allowing tax dollars to be used to support religious charter schools? What was that? Yeah, I am starting to think that you people don't like me very much. I personally do not have an issue per se with the idea of a religious freedom commission or having an interaction between government and religion when it comes to outreach, when it comes to serving the most vulnerable, because we've done that. We have a history of that in this country. Other administrations have had those kinds of liaisons. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have those kinds of partnerships if they are for the purpose, again, of serving the most vulnerable in our society. My concern with that kind of endeavor is always the same thing. Whenever we talk about the melding of secular government and religion, is what are the safeguards? Are there safeguards in place to make sure that one particular religious orientation is not given preference over others? That's my big concern with anything like that, okay? It relates to the idea of, religious freedom. Well, great, but religious freedom for who? If it's truly religious freedom for all denominations, and particularly for minority denominations, the Jewish community, I don't want to say, I hate the terms literal and progressive Christianity, but if it's to exclude, for instance, the Jewish community or particular orientations within Christianity, because we know that's a wide spectrum, then I think that's a harmful thing. I think that's a time when I do not want government and religion in bed together. I don't think that ever ends well historically, because it's a very, very short step from there to the government deciding that one religion is the religion for the country. It's not great for the country, but as a Christian minister, my bigger concern is I don't think it's good for us. I don't think it's good for religion, the free exercise of religion, because again, it can very easily get to the point where now the government is telling you how you can practice your faith. And that, I think, is a very dangerous road, and we've seen it happen historically. So. Your turn. Yeah, Jack?
When I go into a Catholic church, Mary seems to dominate. But in the Protestant faith, it's all Jesus. Why is there a difference?
But Jack's question is, when he goes into a Catholic church, Mary is a very predominant figure, whereas in the Protestant church that is not so much the case. Why is that? In Catholic theology, Mary is considered to be almost a co-creator with God. Okay, she has that kind of elevated standing in Catholic theology as the mother of Jesus. She is exalted in that way, where the Protestant church takes a more human view of Mary. Yes, she is to be revered for the role that she played in advancing God's story in the world forward as the mother of Jesus, but she is not considered to be a divine figure, as the Catholic Church almost sees her as theologically. All right, let's see what fun one we have here. Oh, what happened to the medal you used to wear during communion? I noticed you haven't worn it the past few months. If you remember, I explained that the medal that I wore on Communion Sundays had belonged to my mother. She was what was called a Eucharistic minister in the Catholic Church. And so when she died, I asked if I could have that. And so I have been wearing it on Communion Sundays for the last 13 years now, since her death. Well, unfortunately, when the office was renovated, the medal disappeared. We have been unable to locate it. Trust me, Jenny, Tammy, I have just turned the place upside down. Can't locate it. So, nothing lasts forever, right? Your turn. Bruce?
Each Sunday you tell us about the congregational part and the United Church of Christ part.
Yeah.
Down below, smaller print, fine print maybe, an open and affirming.
Oh, yeah.
And second, creation justice. What other initiatives does the UCC have that we might consider or we have not considered?
So Bruce is asking about the designation on the bottom of the front page of the bulletin that we're an open and affirming and creation justice church, and he's asking what other designations that the United Church of Christ has that a congregation can consider. I don't have the list memorized. There's a couple off the top of my head that come to mind. There is economic justice. There is a peace and justice designation that can be offered. There's one related to mental health. Kathy, what's that? Why? It's called, the acronym is WISE, and it's a mental health emphasis designation. Those are three that come to mind. I think I'm pretty sure there's more than that, but I can't off the top of my head. But if you go to the UCC website, you can find those various designations. Yeah. Would you provide some context for the Lord's Prayer? I would like to like it, but it sounds archaic to me. All right, so let's break it down. Okay. So the Lord's Prayer is actually a synthesis of things that were well known in other Jewish prayers in Jesus' day. And he kind of pieces them together. So we start with, our Father who art in heaven. Okay, so it's an address. A lot of prayers start with an address to God. Okay? Father being a common way of addressing God in that time. Although in the Aramaic that Jesus spoke, that word that we get translated in Greek as father is more along the lines of, daddy or papa. Okay, it's a much more intimate type of connotation. So it's an expression of the relationship that Jesus saw that he had with God and wants us to have as well. Okay, so our Father who art in heaven, who is above and beyond us, hallowed be your name. Okay, blessed be your name. Again, that's all part of sort of the address to God, the appropriate kind of way to approach God. And then we get, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Okay, that's what's known as a prayer of petition. Okay, and what we are called to ask for is that, again, it's just a way in that time and place of asking that the ways of God become the ways of the world. Okay? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Okay, that understanding of the kingdom of God in Jesus' time being that day when the world and creation come into union with God and God's ways. Yeah, I got to do that. Sorry. When you try to break it down, I got to do it in my head. Give us this day our daily bread. Okay, again, another petition that our needs are met. It's not an ask for abundance. It's an ask for our basic needs. And notice the word is our, not my. Okay, it's not give me my daily bread. It's give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our debts or trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Again, an ask of God to forgive us our trespasses, something that we believe that God does. So why the other part of it? As we forgive those who trespass against us. One of the interpretations of that I like is that it's a reflection of the fact that if we are unable to forgive others, it becomes near impossible for us to accept the idea that God will forgive us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Okay, the deliver us from evil part seems pretty straightforward, but lead us not into temptation. That's the part that I get asked about the most. What is that about? Why would God lead us into temptation? Some other more modern translations have suggested that the sentiment expressed is for God to lead us away from temptation. But in the context that the prayer was originally put together in, there was this idea. Of course, it's Fred Craddock refers to it as this part of the prayer as apocalyptic, representing the idea in that time and place that Jesus' return was imminent, that the end times were coming, God was, the time of God was right around the corner. Okay? And one of the theological understandings in that time is that when that time was coming, preceding it would be a time where evil would just be magnified. Okay, and so the understanding of that particular phrase, lead us not into temptation, was understood as a petition to God to keep us from a level of temptation that would be beyond our ability to withstand it. Okay. So again, that is, the question was adding some context to the Lord's Prayer. Well, that is the historical context in terms of both on the ground in Jesus' time, but also larger sort of theological understandings both then and now. Yeah, Chet? Chet's question is, some parts of Christianity do not allow women to be clergy. Where does that come from in the Bible? Okay, I don't remember which exact letter of Paul's it is off the top of my head, but it's largely grounded in something that Paul says, that women should not speak in church. That's essentially what is said. And this is where, again, we get into, as we talk about a lot here, context. The context of when something was said or written and why. Okay? If you look at all of Paul's letters, you will find a very wide range of opinions and statements, sometimes about the same issue. Okay? The reason for that is that Paul writes his letters to specific early Christian communities for specific reasons. Okay? So it is believed that that particular phrase comes from a particular letter to a particular community in a time of conflict. Okay? And one of the things that we have to understand about Paul is, along with the fact that he gets into some very heady theological language, he is at heart a pragmatist. Okay? He's not always right in terms of the big picture, but he's always trying to do what he thinks is the right thing to alleviate a conflict within those early Christian communities. So it seems as if in this particular instance, there was a conflict about the role of women in the church. And we are now at a time, of course, where Christianity is starting to become more patriarchal. And so it's believed that he makes that statement as a way of heading off that particular conflict in that particular community. It's not meant, it was never meant to be a prescription for the entire church. Okay? Why do you refer to our Sunday services as our worship celebrations? I do that because for me, the word celebration implies two things. It implies something that is most important, vitally important, but also meant to be joyful. Okay? And my experience with Christianity, and not just in Catholicism, but a number of Protestant churches, is that we can be a little bit dour. And I'm not sure that helps us. I find it hard to believe that people, particularly people who don't have much church experience, would be attracted to a time like this in community that is just nothing but somber. So I use the word celebration to proclaim the message, to deliver the message that this is vitally important, but it doesn't have to be dour. And in fact, joy and fun and humor are found in numerous places in the Bible. Okay, we are the people of a Jesus who went to weddings and danced and celebrated and all of those things. So I don't think Christianity does itself any favors when it forgets the celebratory part of what we're about. So that's why I use it. It's basically a message. It's to send a message. Yes? Okay, so Steve is asking about a writing of Pope Francis about peacemaking, that peace must be made. And then he is also sort of comparing that with a couple of the scripture readings, the resurrection appearances that we have dealt with the last couple of weeks, where Jesus says to the disciples, "Peace I give you." So he's asking, well, which is it? Is it made or is it given? Yes. Yes. As is the case with so many things in our spiritual lives and in the theological understandings that the Bible leads us to. It is often a both and. We talk a lot in the UCC about us being a both and denomination, that we are not, we're not looking for polarities. We are looking for the understanding that more than one thing can be true at the same time. And I think those two are complementary. I don't think that they're opposites. Yes, we must be actively engaged in peacemaking. But I think, and I think this is kind of connected to what I just said about the part about forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. We must have a mentality that is willing to forgive others our sins, or else we can't accept God's forgiveness. I think it's kind of the same thing here. We must be willing to accept the peace of God that Christ offers us in order to be able to go out and make peace in the world. Okay, it is that fuel of God's peace, that God's peace is the fuel for us. It gives us the initiative to go out and to do that. I'm going to take this yellow one because this yellow one just showed up out of... who is your favorite author? I honestly can say I don't have one. I cannot think of a favorite author. I mean, there's a number that, I really like a lot. I like Jonathan Haidt, and I like, I don't read a lot of novels, admittedly. I probably should read more of those. I read books by comedians, stuff like that. I really like, for many years, I read a lot of Howard Gardner, an educational theorist. Mary Ludy, in terms of spiritual writing. Mary Ludy is a regular contributor to our denomination's daily devotional. She's a pastor and a former seminary professor. She is wonderful. I highly recommend that you check her out if you get the chance. I can tell you what my favorite book is. And by favorite book, I mean the one that's been sort of the most influential in many ways for me personally and professionally. I mean, outside the Bible, of course. And that is the book, it's in the time it was written. It was called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Okay, Viktor Frankl, a Swiss psychiatrist who was Jewish and was interned in 2 different Nazi concentration camps. And he writes this book, Man's Search for Meaning, based upon his experiences in those camps. And the basic premise is that what came to him, the insight that came to him during that experience, was that those who were able to endure the atrocities, the struggles, the hardships of that environment were those who were able to find meaning, to find some kind of meaning in the experience. And mostly what he meant, what he was referring to, was that they found their meaning in service to others, in finding ways to make life even the most minute bit better for those who they were imprisoned with. And so he developed his entire mode of psychotherapy based upon that experience. That book has probably had more influence on me than any other. Okay. But I'll keep thinking about that favorite author thing. It's one of those questions, like if you get asked, what's your favorite album or what's your favorite, you think, and then 5 minutes later, I'll have a different answer. So I'll get back to you on that one. Your turn. Neil? So Neil's referring to one of the quotes in the for your consideration window. The one from Voltaire, the bottom one. Judge a person by their questions rather than by their answers. Why did I choose that for today? Well, the obvious answer is we're asking questions today. So that is, that's the obvious answer. And one of the things, that we've talked about before, certainly in Bible study and in our Tuesday night units, is that, in my mind at least, the questions are more important than the answers. Because the questions reflect the desire to constantly explore. Okay, it's a sort of, in my mind, it's kind of a takeoff of is it Robert Cole's, the unexamined life is not worth living? I forget who that was. Originates with Socrates? Thank you, John. The unexamined life is not worth living. Okay, in my mind, the unexamined faith is not worth having. Okay? So that's why I included that particular quote. Okay? Especially when it comes to our spiritual lives, because there are many instances in which a definitive answer is pretty hard to come by. We talked about that on Easter. I mentioned that I'm not going to pretend to tell you I know what resurrection is, because I don't, and neither did the writers of the Gospels or the New Testament. It's described in a few different ways by them. So there are a lot of things about the spiritual life that I think it's hard to say this is the definitive answer. Communion's another one. We talked about that. That question was asked on one of these Sundays a while back about the meaning of communion. Christianity has several different interpretations of what communion means. So to me, that quote exemplifies this idea that the questions are more important than the answers for our spiritual lives. Time for a couple more. Why do you regularly refer to them as the Hebrew Scriptures and not the Old Testament? Okay, that's a bias from my seminary days. Because by the time I went to seminary, most seminaries were referring to the Hebrew Scriptures and not the Old Testament. And the particular reason for that was had to do with, I'm trying to remember the word. I don't remember the word. But the idea was that by referring to them as the Old Testament and the Christian Scriptures as the New Testament, you were almost setting up this idea of superiority. That the Gospels of the New Testament were superior to the Old Testament. It's like one was replacing the other. You didn't have any need of the other one anymore. That was part of it. Also, it was seen as sort of denigrating our Jewish brothers and sisters as second-class citizens in God's eyes. So there were those kinds of reasons involved why seminary professors were referring to them as the Hebrew Scriptures and not the Christian Scriptures. And when you look at the Gospels, Jesus himself at no point rejects the Hebrew Scriptures. Okay, though that was his Bible. Okay, so that really is what's behind my use of that term as opposed to the Old Testament. But it doesn't bother me if the word, the phrase Old Testament is used. I know that's what most of us grew up with. Okay. Any others from you? Yes?
So since today we are listening
Why do you ask? Sorry, that's the psychology training. Always answer a question with another question. Question I have. The unspoken question for me every Sunday or every class or every Bible study is, did it make a difference today? That's the question, the unspoken question I leave with every Sunday in the back of my mind. Did it matter? Did it matter to even one person? That's a question that I never, in the end, you never really know the answer to. It's the ambiguity that comes with the job, and I'm okay with ambiguity, as you know. So it's okay. It's okay. In the end, it's just I try to be as faithful as possible. I try to speak from what I think God's Spirit is leading me to, and then once it leaves your mouth, it's in your hands from there. So that's the. It was a good question. I will leave it up to you whether it was a good answer or not. So, okay, one more, and then we'll get to communion. Coming from our UCC church up north, we said the Apostles' or Nicene Creed every week. I was wondering why we do not recite the creed here. I was fascinated by this question because I've never been in a UCC church that recited the creed, either the Apostles' or the Nicene Creed. I was really taken back by that question. Now, again, I'm not criticizing it. I mean, that's in the UCC. Each congregation determines, how it will worship, and each pastor has the responsibility to make those decisions. But the basic reason why I don't use it, why I've never used it in any of my churches, is that we are considered to be what's called a non-creedal denomination. Okay, a creed is a statement of assent, a statement of belief. It's doctrinal in nature. And in the UCC, we are generally considered a non-doctrinal denomination. We have what's called, one of our founding pillars is what's called freedom of conscience, which is that each of you, each of us, is free to decide what we will or will not believe. Now, that doesn't mean it's just sort of free-range spirituality. There's also the flip side of freedom of conscience is what's called covenant. We've talked about that a few times. It is the idea that we enter into covenant, a promise, a sacred relationship with each other to discuss and debate and work together to help formulate our individual beliefs. So that's why, again, no other UCC church that I've ever been in has used the creed. And, I haven't used it in any of my churches as well. We have something in the UCC called a statement of faith, which is found in many of the hymnals. I actually don't remember if ours is not a UCC hymnal, so we wouldn't be in there. There's a UCC statement of faith, and I have heard that used in some UCC churches. In the church in Montclair that I first started it in, that was used pretty regularly. When I went to Westfield, my first job as senior minister, I attempted to use that statement of faith on a particular Sunday and was told in no uncertain terms to never do that again. So it really is sort of it is a community, congregational kind of determination as to whether they will use those statements or not. But again, the idea is that we are a non-creedal denomination, so those statements are not mandated. That is something for a congregation to determine. Okay? All right. Thank you very much. As always, your questions were fantastic.